Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Iblis Manifestations Podcast. This channel features lengthy off-limits conversations with various different artists and entrepreneurs, predominantly from the underground metal scene. We take deep dives into the topics of life, music, spirituality, and take insight from a variety of thought-provoking perspectives from personalities who you don't often hear from in a mainstream settings. I am your host, Cheyenne, and I was originally born and raised in Iran and currently reside in the UK. I am the frontman and founding member of the black death metal band TRIVAX, who have been active since 2009. The band originally started in the Islamic Republic of Iran, where such type of music is banned as well as a punishable offense. You can check the band's pages for any updates on tour dates as well as new music. I am also a personal trainer and an online fitness coach who specializes in people achieving the best versions of themselves physically and mentally. Having been someone who was once extremely out of shape and overweight, I find it to be my duty to be able to pass on the information and knowledge which I've gained to help others achieve the same transformation. The Iblis Manifestations Podcast also features a variety of solo episodes where I discuss personal experiences and anecdotes in a very candid fashion, covering everything from mental health, spirituality, philosophy, and even paranormal experiences. This is the Iblis Manifestations Podcast. To support it, be sure to subscribe to the channel and visit the link in the descriptions.
It's great talking to you, Cheyenne, really. And best of luck to your endeavors with this podcast. I think it's a great initiative.
You're my favorite person to talk to for interviews and stuff. So I love what you're espousing out here. I love the knowledge and the perspectives that you're curating through this, and I'm just so honored to be a part of it. Thank you.
As I told you, it was one of the most interesting interviews I've ever had, because we talk a lot more things than just music, and I really appreciated that.
I respect you deeply, and it's an honor to be here.
And friends, remember as always, better to die on your feet than to live on your knees. Enjoy the podcast. Obviously, we were going to record this a little bit earlier, but I think this works even better now because it's kind of evening time and it's
like
just the
right
right
around
setting.
dusk.
Yeah, exactly.
Like yeah, perfect.
Absolutely. Kyle, it's a pleasure to have you back on the podcast.
Okay, man. Pleasure.
Yeah,
Pleasure to be
really
here.
Looking
always.
Forward to this.
Yeah, me too.
Amazing. So, I'm just going to be straight with you, man. I'm going to go right off the bat and ask you the important question that everyone wants to ask you.
Yeah.
Are you a Nazi?
I love this question because I am not a National Socialist. I am not a fascist. I have never been in line with any kind of a group that is aligned with anything political, let alone that. And you know, it's a funny thing because a lot of people got really pissed off when it's like he could just come out and say he's not a Nazi. And I was like, well, you know, many people these days have redefined these terms, redefine language. So it's like, tell me what a Nazi is. So as a Nazi, we could probably agree, at least on the old school, someone that judges someone, hates someone based on their cultural background, the color of their skin. No, I'm not that. But now the term has expanded into just new horizons. Are you critical of border policies? You're a Nazi then. Or what do you think about, gender ideology? Then you're a Nazi. And so, it's a bullshit term. It's one that gets leveraged left and right. I'd say that, the clearest answer is I judge people based on the content of their character.
That's fair enough. Sure.
Yeah, and I've had friends and have friends that are from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different cultures, different races.
That never seems to be one that sort of wins.
Doesn't appease anyone.
No.
They go, no, you're still a Nazi.
Yeah.
Well, and then you got to ask the question, what does?
Yeah.
What does
Sure.
appease them? And there's a lot of irony involved in this because we tend to get this targeted by one certain group of people, and there's usually a commonality. That commonality usually is Marxism of some form.
Right.
And so there's some irony there because Karl Marx is obviously their guy. Karl Marx was very racist. He had very racist things to say. Anti-Semitic. It's fine for them, not for me. And so let me clarify there. When I say that, it's because the attack is on symbols and individuals that I've leveraged in the past for my bands. Julius Evola was a big one. You used Julius Evola. He was involved in the fascist party. People like to say he was a Nazi. No, he was not a Nazi. He was very, very influential in the Italian fascist movement. Not trying to skirt that one. That is a fact.
Sure. Okay.
Our interest has always been, though, the esoteric. And he wrote vast amounts of really important works in the occult, right? I mean, to me, it would be like looking at taking something maybe parallel to that, like Heidegger. And now we say, you're not allowed to reference Heidegger. He was part of the Nazi party. He's also considered, his contributions, to psychology, to existentialism, hermeneutics were massive. And so it's just really funny because it seems to almost be like this cherry picking. And, and again, beyond that, so they'll point out these things or they'll be like, okay, this is why he's problematic because they quoted Julius Evola, right? Okay. Or they used the sun wheel,
Have you ever used that?
No. There's a photo of me wearing, this is really ironic because there's a really infamous article about me now. And in that article, it says that I'm wearing a sonar rod. And it says, obviously a sonar rod, zoom in on a very blurry picture. And then so obvious that they had to put a graphic of a sonar rod next to it. It is not a sonar rod. Right. So it's a very basic Colbrot sun wheel. One is left turning, one is right turning. And so, these are just kind of the things that occur. But it's interesting because at the same time, so here's all the proof, right? And they line these things up one after another. But they have to ignore all kinds of other stuff, like our use of Kabbalah and Hebrew letters. Our use of, we had quoted Al-Hallaj, who was a Sufi Islamic mystic.
That's right. Yeah.
And I'm like, so if you guys have a problem that we quoted Evola, we also quoted Al-Hallaj, right? And so we have drawn from, anything from the Eastern Tantric stuff.
Sure.
So there are multiple cultural influences from Judaism to Islam and, Eastern Europe, Western Europe into the East. And some of these characters that have influenced the lyrics. And now the ironic thing is when I'm referencing this, most of this is not Akhlys at all. It's all Nightbringer.
Sure.
But
that's right. Yeah, Akhlys obviously has a very specific direction.
Sure.
And I understand it's Akhlys that's getting most of that heat, if you will. There's one thing I have to ask you as well. I appreciate you obviously clarifying that. I think there's one thing that I saw, because obviously we've already spoken about this before, but also I have had more time to look into this and research it for myself and actually have a look into it. And one of the things that I saw maybe not commonly, I would say, within the few people that seemed upset. Like, for example, you recently got announced for Fortress Fest in the UK. Great festival, by the way.
Sure.
I think they're doing a really good organization there. Actually, TRIVAX played the first year, and then I attended the second year. And I'll probably be there when you're there as well.
Yeah.
But one thing that I saw about like the little bit of the outrage and the backlash, because I was like curious. I was like, oh, okay, well, what is it now? Like let's look into it. Yeah. Let's see why they want to do this. And one of the most common arguments that I saw, and I know that some people who I actually know, by the way, they were writing to the promoter saying something to the summary of, you are booking a band who has a member in that band, meaning you, of course. They were talking about you, saying that you are someone who wants to see members of the LGBTQ harmed, as well as people of different races. Now, I'm going to ask you a question just based on that. Do you have any kind of a history of violence or anything like that at all?
Well, zero in this context. Yeah, I have a history of. I've got a legal history of violence, not discriminatory violence, not directed at any of these groups. And it's funny.
Would you mind? Sorry to interrupt. Would you mind just unpacking on that just a little bit? Was it because I know that when you were younger, you used to be. We both were, I suppose. But do you mind just unpacking that a little bit?
That was just like bar brawls and shit like that, Actually, the legal history there was I got into a physical confrontation with a security guard. That's what it was. I mean, it wasn't even anything all that dramatic. A couple punches thrown by both parties, and not a big deal,
To play the devil's advocate, again, because that's my job. It's called Iblis Manifestations for a reason. What was the background of that security guard?
I don't know if I could really tell you, but he looked very Caucasian. So that's all. Yeah, I didn't know the guy, so I don't know. Yeah,
that's fair enough, man. But what I'm trying to get to is why is it that you think they're making that assumption on you? Because they seem very strong on their stance, and I haven't, frankly speaking, personally, I know that we know each other, but also I wanted to do my own due diligence. And frankly, I haven't seen that sort of evidence.
Because it doesn't exist. It's as simple as that. So I think that as time goes on, these things start to snowball. You see, just more and more ridiculous fabrications and a lot of really wild leap assumptions.
Where do you think that comes from, though? Why would they make that assumption?
I don't get the rage. Yeah. So I think that the assumption is they're like, okay, I already read this article. So now the assumption is he's a neo-Nazi, he's a white supremacist. So from there, then it goes X, Y, Z. They're like, okay, well then that means that he wants. And I saw those same comments. If you are a part of, the gay community, or if you're part of, if you're a person of color, understand Kyle Spanswick wants you dead. Very dramatic statement.
One that caught me off guard was the Christian thing.
And then the Christian thing, I'm not sure what that's about, unless you're a Christian. I guess I'm okay with Christians, apparently.
I think it was someone saying something to the point of, again, this is stuff that I've seen on the internet, you can see anything on the internet, but that was the only way I could look it up. I was like, well, why is there such an outrage? And I looked it up. So I want to ask you directly, someone said something to the point of, for what it's worth, I'm not a white Christian. Someone was saying that if you are a white Christian, then Kyle Spanswick wants you dead. That's basically what they said. What do you think that's all about?
I have no idea. I have no clue.
Are you a Christian?
I am not a Christian. Okay. Yeah, I am definitely not a Christian.
It's good to know. Sure.
Yeah.
Even if you were, I wouldn't judge you.
I've got parents and friends who are Christian, Catholic, all over the place, and I certainly don't wish them dead based upon that. So.
Okay, but you wish others dead
based on other
they're
things.
not white.
Yeah,
Cool.
there is no.
Okay.
It's a great ambivalence. It's like, I don't know these fucking people. I don't care what your background is. I don't care what your sexual orientation is. The way I see this shit is, I don't give a fuck. I don't know these people. I don't care. And then the people that I do meet either like you or dislike you based off, again, the context of your character, you know, and that's about it.
Okay.
You know,
Well, that's fair enough.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, but you know, and it's interesting because I like to come back to again, you know, if we were to look at these individuals who have influenced the lyrics in Nightbringer and Akhlys, some of them are so wildly different that they, you know, if you put them side by side, those two individuals probably wouldn't get along very well. You know, it just clashes. Yeah, clashes on probably a social level or a political level, but that's never what I was getting at. You know, and I've always done this with a degree of ambivalence. You know, a lot of people say, okay, you know, I'll be like, well, the quotation from Julius Evola was about Valmakara, which is interesting because now we're talking about Eastern Tantra. No one ever mentions that part. They just say, oh, a quotation from Julius Evola.
What was it particularly about the Eastern Tantra that sort of attracted you to that you wanted to kind of merge your own art with it?
Well, I think that it appeals because it was Valmakara, which is exactly is left-hand path. That's what it translates to.
Yeah.
And so the practices in that, you know, I find a lot of synchronicity with, of course, other interpretations of left-hand path or like an adverse path. And so, you know, and it's there's not a whole lot out there, especially in the English-speaking world, written on this. But one of the greatest books is written by Julius Evola called The Yoga of Power, and that's exactly what it's about. And so that's all the references there. I mean, it's an excerpt of him, one of the very few, speaking. And he's speaking exactly about this. He's not speaking about politics. He's not speaking about fascism. None of these things. It's in French. There's French people out in the world that can sit there and fucking listen to it and confirm this, you know? It's not that hard to do. But again, it's just cherry picking. It's just cherry picking. They're going to point these things out, take things out of context, blow things out of proportion. And now you've jumped from Nightbringer used Julius Evola, and now that has blown up into Kyle Spanswick wants certain parties and individuals dead. So
it's quite the leap.
It's quite the leap.
I can appreciate that, sure.
Yeah.
Well, man, I can only thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, sure.
Not obviously just for the sake of the interview, but also to me as a person. You know, I was genuinely curious. I was like, you know, I wasn't sure, but you know, like I said to you, I wanted to do my own due diligence as well and make sure that we're understanding, we're on the right page. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you know, people will still listen to this and roll their fucking eyes at it and still do what they do. Do
you think so?
That is fine. Okay. I think that you have plenty of the people that are already attacking have already made up their mind. And there's probably very few of those people that will be swayed, but maybe there's a couple, who knows, or maybe there's people that are on the fence, you know. Again, I approach this shit with a level of ambivalence, you know.
Sure.
I don't owe anybody anything. So, you know, like, yes, I will clarify my direction and my intent, but, you know, even when I did these things, like, again, when people are like, you know, maybe you could have used someone else instead of Julius Evola to get at this idea. Yeah, well, I didn't, you know. Create your own fucking band, do as you see fit, you know.
I mean, that's fair enough. Yeah, for sure. And I think, you know, perhaps this is I was speaking to my very good friend Jackie about this, well, our mutual friend Jackie, you know, and it was that, I think what's happening in music, because obviously I come from a very different background to I think most people are accustomed to within the subgenre. Yeah. And there's a reason why I have a big problem with censorship, because I've seen what the road looks like further down the line of where it is now. You know, I've seen what the road looks like further down the line where it is actual discrimination, that you are discriminated against for the choice of music that you listen to, and your life could in fact be in danger about it.
Sure.
You know, unfortunately, what I'm disappointed about is I don't see a lot of these people going after Islam, for example, for their treatment of the same people that they're trying to defend. You know, the way that they would treat them in the Middle East, you know, I have gay friends over in Iran, who live the most fucked up, confused lives ever. And that's because the simple fact of who they are could get them killed by
literally killed
entire surrounding, right?
Yeah.
And that's very confusing because that's just who they are, And obviously, I've had conversations with them and tried to understand it as best as I could, it's a complicated thing. But I get really, I get kind of sad, when I'm like, I think maybe it comes from a good-hearted place, or at least I hope it does. I like to see the good in people, and maybe I'm actually a little bit naive in that way.
Yeah.
But I like to see that when people are like going online and writing these complaints and these things, like they feel that they're doing something good. I like to hope that, I hope it's not just, let me take everyone else down to make myself feel better. I hope it genuinely from a place of, I want to protect a certain type of ideology and whatever. And that, to an extent, I think is fine. I actually think that's a great mindset and standard to have.
Sure.
But then it's at what cost, Because I think I always looked at censorship as to me, it's reminiscent of the use of chemical warfare during battle. So I have obviously a stronger connection with that with the Iran and Iraq war because Saddam Hussein was using chemical weapons on the Iranians, and it's horrible for anyone who doesn't know what chemical warfare looks like. It's terrible. Mustard gas basically makes your lungs blister from the inside, and this was actually a war crime. That and something that they were saying, the international committee was saying that you're not allowed to use these things, but then Saddam was using it on Iran, and then they were kind of hush about it because they were scared of Iran. Anyway, this is just a little bit of political sort of lesson, but when I look at censorship, I think it's the same as chemical warfare. Why? Because it's something that you're not the only side that gets to use that now. So if you've used that, if at any point in the future the opposition overcomes your position, they will use the same methods. And it's going to be fucked up. It's going to be another form of totalitarianism, which again is something that you don't want. Which is why it's important to have conversations and actually ask questions as opposed to just wholesale buy into things. And
which doesn't occur much these days.
No.
I mean, people live in their own fucking echo chambers, and so and I don't know how altruistic these individuals are trying to be. I think maybe you do have many of them that have are a good intent in mind, but I think that it's almost like a cult. It's like they get caught up into this thing, and it's almost like a mania and an obsession. And you see it. And I've been saying this forever. I was like, give it time, man. These people will eat themselves, and you're already seeing this happen. You're already seeing this happen with bands who are very vocally left, being picked apart by their own side for not being left enough. And so, it's like, man, it's like a lot of it is just very nihilistic.
I think an example of that is perhaps what happened with Afsky recently.
Perfect fucking example, man. Perfect example. And so, it starts to feel like a fucking cult. And so, again, I have to approach these things with a level of fucking ambivalence. Like, I don't give a fuck if you've got a problem with who I referenced. Don't listen to it. Of course, they're going to take it a step further. They're going to take it a step further and get you canceled, which is, really ironic because it falls back into what you were saying. It's a slippery slope, this censorship. And they only like it, but it's their kind of censorship. If it's on their side.
Well, what I'm envisioning here to be less cryptic and more to the point when I'm talking about this. Let's say you imagine a world where the earth is taken over by, let's say, actual literal fascists, and they impose censorship on you and everything that you've fought for in terms of human rights. that have, that people have gone through a lot of struggle to build over the years, but they devalued it so much by shoving it in everyone's face to such a fucking degree, and also using methods of such as censorship. Democracy is not an easy thing, but it's something that you might have people who might have different opinions than you, and you should be able to speak to them. Now, obviously, if those opinions are going to cause harm, then that's again a different story, which is why I'm always recommending people to just look a little bit more into perhaps some of these religions that are being imported, should we say, and the effects that can have on our society and our world when harm is concerned. But that's why I appreciate you clarifying your stance on it and your position, because these are all the comments that I see. I wanted to hear it from you directly from the source and see what's up.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Yeah. So, and I almost would envision exactly what you said, coming from the other side, from a completely Marxist society, because I see that has seeped into everything. It is very much in vogue right now. We went from old school Marxism to cultural Marxism to gender Marxism, and we end up in the same fucking place. You're going to end up with this, nowhere good, and everything getting shut down that doesn't fall in line with it. And so, and I always want to just step outside of all that shit, because I mean, truthfully, like, I quit caring about politics a long time ago, but then politics start to care about you.
Yeah, sure. I feel that.
And that's the crux of the issue. So yeah, at the end of the day, there, like I said, there'll be, and I'm not trying to build a bridge between my critics and, I don't really give a fuck. If someone wants to ask me something, they come up and have a conversation with me. I'm always willing for that. But other than that, it's like, I'm doing what I'm doing. If someone fucking hates it or misinterprets it or whatever that is, fuck them, Not my problem moving forward until it is my problem. Until I'm canceled. Yeah.
So hypothetically, let's say someone's watching this now and they're still not convinced. Would you be happy to have a conversation with them at a show?
Yeah, sure. If they came to a show, I'd be up to, and it would depend on how they approached me,
Okay. So as long as it's not with a machete or a mace.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't get into black metal to sit down and start doing, fielding fucking a million fucking political questions from individuals I don't know.
Of course.
Yeah, so I might not be open to that so much, because this is not what I wanted to do. I wanted to make music,
Of course, but I think that given the current circumstances, I wanted to have you on because I want to talk about your music and the new album and all these amazing things that you've got going on. But to me, it felt like it was an important issue to discuss, given the current climate, if you will.
Yeah.
Amazing, man.
Yeah.
So obviously, speaking of which, I do now actually want to talk to you about the music and everything. So you guys recently released House of Black Geminus.
Yes.
From Debimur Morty, and man, what a fucking album! Holy shit,
man. Thank you.
It sounds great. I mean, you obviously, for people who've been following both Akhlys and Iblis Manifestations for a minute, you did kind of give us a nice bit of preview back in November last year, which was cool, of course, But just tell us about the album, man. I mean, it's a massive wall of sound. It is actually literally nightmare-inducing, in the best sense of the word. Just let's unpack it.
Sure, man. Yeah, so I spent almost 2 years working on the fucking album. And of course that wasn't a constantly working during that 2 years. That was just moments of highs and lows in the inspirational process as I was going through all the ideas and pulling the riffs together. And I think conceptually, conceptually lightning just kind of struck, and I became very obsessed with the whole idea of the House of the Black Geminus. I actually had a completely different thematic concept in mind before in a completely different title, which
Okay.
I'll probably end up revisiting.
I was just about to ask you that. Yeah.
I think so, because
Okay.
I more saw it as like, okay, I'm gonna put this on the side just because I became so singularly obsessed with this concept, and when something like that happens, I think that's when you need to put everything into it. And so it became House of the Black Geminus, and I started writing the very first song, which is literally the first song on the album, which is Mask of Night Speaking. And at the same time, I was kind of just hammering out this concept and making it more nuanced just in my mind, and writing ideas down, writing lyrical ideas down over this period of time. And kind of in a nutshell, like it's so the house is which I think we even I relayed some of this in the previous podcast, but it's just kind of a place of ordeal in dreams. I think it's something that people can relate to, like in dreams, like this dreadful abode. It's definitely one from my childhood that was very significant.
Yeah.
And
You mentioned that before, because as a child, I know the reference to our first episode, but you mentioned that you used to have terrible night terrors and almost sounded like springs of possession that you were experiencing somehow.
Yep. So that was kind of a pillar of my childhood, was these terrible dream occurrences, and but even into adulthood, I just started thinking about the symbol of the house, and you even see this in certain like haunted house tales, or maybe even classical mythology, where the abode itself is a presence. It's its own presiding presence,
There was a film, wasn't there? Do you remember? It was like an animation film, or it was almost like a cartoon type film. I think it came out in 2000.
Really?
I forget the name. It might have just been called The House, or Monster House. That's what it was.
Okay.
Did you ever watch that?
No, I don't think I'm familiar with that
so
one.
that's basically what it was. Obviously in a more like cartoonish kind of sense, but that's what it was. I think,
but you can even look at something like Stephen King's The Shining, right? Like the Overlook Hotel is almost it's an intellect, it's a presiding spirit. Or you can look at another Stephen King, Salem's Lot, as obviously it's a vampire story, but I think what's more subtly behind that is the house that overlooks the entire town.
Sure.
And so,
by the way, man, sorry to interrupt your flow there. What's amazing about this episode right now is the fact that we are recording it inside a house.
We are in
Bergen.
In
a living room.
Which
is
is
very
amazing.
appropriate, right?
It is very.
It wasn't planned, by the way, for anyone listening right now. This was just a matter of necessity, but I think it worked out pretty fucking appropriately.
So that was kind of the idea. Is in this house it's got usually a presiding spirit, and that presiding spirit is this completely dreadful spirit of other. And so I wanted to explore that concept. And then as I was coming up with ideas of it, of course, I started kind of thinking of like this Dante-esque type ordeal and journey. And so then I thought it might be interesting, because I was thinking of the most dreadful places not only in these dreams, but in the waking world, in houses, which I've spoken about before, like these liminal places within a house, which usually are, the attic and the cellar or the basement. And so I thought it'd be interesting to structure it very traditionally in this hierarchy of, you've got the middle abode, and that's where that's where like the ancestral rites would be done, and so I related it to the hearth, and this would be where the typical living space, I guess you could say, and then below that you have the cellar, which I related more strongly to the underworld, and then above that the attic, and the attic to like kind of the celestial and the Imperium. So I just kind of got obsessed with these ideas, and did put a lot of thought into it. So a lot of back and forth with my friend Richard Gavin, who ended up contributing lyrics to it. Author of not only horror fiction but also esoteric work.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah,
we're interesting guy.
We think very much alike in these regards. So, and just kind of over 2 years, musically and conceptually hammered this whole monstrosity out, which was absolutely fucking taxing. Again, a lot of highs and lows, but I'm very pleased with how it came out.
I mean, I think it's a very powerful concept because you think of a house as that's where people are. Well, that's basically where people live, and it's like you could say, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's just a house." But what it means is the fact that that's where people are not only at their most vulnerable, but at their truest.
Sure.
And I think that our thoughts and our experiences have a residue on the world around us,
Yeah.
And we already talked about stone tape theory before, where I told you that that's basically, where like stones and things like that can actually record the memory of the events surrounding them,
Sure.
whether it's some complex electromagnetic thing. I don't know exactly how the mechanism works, but that's kind of the idea. And I think that when you're in a house, those the good thoughts and the good feelings, but then also the feelings of dread, the feelings of sadness, sorrow, solitude.
Absolutely,
But also, a house is probably the place where people most often would think about death. If I wanted to make a presumption about that,
and not only think about death, but more often than not, they die there.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's what you're doing, like when you're this is a really grim thing, but it's like even when you get like a mortgage and then you get a house to live in, a part of that is just so you have a place to die. And that doesn't always happen for everyone, Sometimes you might get run over by a car. But generally speaking, it's almost like your spirit needs to have a home or a place to reside in, And there's something important about locations alone, I think. That kind of gives a lot of weight to that. So the idea of that having a spirit of its own doesn't actually seem that far-fetched at all when you think of it like that.
No, and it was, and again, it's very classical. Like even the Greeks saw things very similar, and whether that spirit at that time, if it's collecting kind of this residue or whatever you want to call it from multiple lives, emotions, lives and deaths, and then it would be more akin to like a egregore. It's kind of a thought construct at that point, perhaps. I couldn't say for certain, but it's something that definitely interests me, and I think that also there's something really dreadful about the concept of like even again if it's whether it's like a haunted house or something like that, because it's an uncanny intrusion into, like you said, your place where you are the most vulnerable. It's supposed to be your sanctuary, and so when your sanctuary turns rotten or black or threatening, you're right at the heart of it. That's the poison dagger in the heart at that point. And so the idea, really interests me, because I was like, well, this is going to invoke the most dread. And, this esoteric dread, the dread of the unnameable other, but the unnameable other in your hearth and home. And so, I think it strikes right to the heart of it.
Absolutely, and you already know that. To me, that's like, it hits home, no pun intended. Because I've experienced that. That's the first episode of Iblis Manifestations is me talking about the paranormal stories that I experienced. And you're very right. It's such an intrusion. Where it's like the place where you go to sleep, you've got these things coming and hanging above your head, just looking down at you. So that's what I experienced, And you can say, oh, you were on drugs or you were imagining it. There's no such thing. That's a very half-assed way of looking at the world, I'm afraid.
Sure.
And you can't hide behind science or whatever excuse you have just because the idea scares you. The sooner you realize that that's a thing that has been a part of human culture for centuries. And since the very beginning, this has been a thing for us. There are so many folklore about this, actually going back to even Iran in particular. So I don't know if you knew this, but there's a lot of folklore from southern parts of Iran where people actually used to live with jinns, and the jinns would often reside in the basement, and people would just try not to disturb them and just leave them to it.
Sure.
Do you know this is actually very, very, very common over there?
Yeah,
especially
that's
in the
really
desert.
interesting. Yeah. Well, of course, with the jinn being connected to the desert, that connection there, that makes sense. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think you've done a great job of just sort of pouring this out into the concept of an album. I think it's very unique, and especially in a world of where all you get is like hail Satan, burn the world, da da da.
Sure.
Which that absolutely has its place.
I still love that too.
Same here.
Yeah.
But I think the way you've come about it from this sort of side angle, where I can't remember anyone doing it to such an extent, but also doing it to such quality. I can't remember ever coming across that before. So I think you guys fucking nailed it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I think with Akhlys too is, I look back at like the stuff I did with Nightbringer, and it was more like, as I had mentioned at the beginning of the interview, we're pulling from these different esoteric aspects from different cultures and different times and different people, and so I'm pulling all these things together that I have read over the years and that were important to me in practice, whether it's, Kabbalah, or whether it's something like Eastern Tantric, or if it's something, like European witchcraft, or even, any of these things, voodoo, voodoo, any stuff like that. But then I started feeling at one point like I'm almost just like just being another mouthpiece for these things that have already been discussed so many times. So I thought, maybe there's a more personal approach that I can take, instead of rehashing these things that have inspired me from these various currents from different cultures, and go more direct. Mainline this fucking shit from exactly my soul and from what I've experienced myself. And so I think that's where, and of course you're still going to see some of the the interpretive lens through my studies, which are going to have those cultural aspects to various cultures. I felt it needed to become more and more intimate and more personal to me. My worry was that it was going to be so personal that people would be like, what the fuck is he talking about? What is this? Yeah.
Is there an element of catharsis in that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it can be very cathartic. I think the whole process, when approached from this perspective, ends up being first a trial, and then there is that eventual. Well, I guess you could fucking fail, but there is eventually a triumph and a catharsis, and I'm not sure if it's so dramatic that I felt it at one definitive point. But it's interesting when you do these kind of works, because now that I'm months and months away from it, I look back and I'm like, I'm not sure at which point that occurred, but it did occur because I feel it now.
I see.
Yeah.
No, that's very interesting, man. And I know that we spoke about this before, where you do almost have this certain sort of pugilistic approach to your own fears, if that's an accurate description to say. Yeah. And I think that kind of helps it, doesn't it, in the sense of, like you're trying to conquer it, but then also accept it, but then also it's not something you can control, so then you kind of just transform it through this filter, and then it becomes the art of Akhlys.
Exactly, which is, very, very Dionysian,
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I another mode, of course, when I say Dionysian, is going to be orgiastic or revelry and intoxication and all those things. And while those things are interesting to me as ecstatic modes or leading to ecstatic possibilities, what's even more interesting to me than that is the dread. And a lot of times those modes in a Dionysian context would commingle or lead to that same dread. But what's more interesting to me is because it feels it's more alien. intoxication isn't necessarily alien, or it could start to bring us on a liminal cusp that does start to feel alien, or orgiastic excess or something. The point is, again, reaching this ecstatic gate, but again, I want to go right for the heart of that entity, that intellect of otherness that is absolutely dreadful, that lies behind all these things. And so that's kind of the approach that I've taken with that, and so that is my obsession with the dreadful things that have occurred to me during slumber, is because that's been my direct experience, and so I have a complete fascination with it.
Have you ever tried ayahuasca?
I have not, but I would love to. Yeah, I would love to. So I'd like to do it in the right setting. I think a lot of those things are kind of approached maybe not in the best way these days, because it's become kind of a
you got to do it in the traditional setting.
Yeah,
absolutely.
No, I'd certainly be interested in that. I'm interested in hallucinogens in general, but and it's not something I do all the time. Very, very rarely, and so
me neither. I mean, everyone knows I'm fully sober, and if you can't tell from the bottle of water I have here, but I'm still very big advocate for psychedelics. I think we need them as a society. I think if we had more of it in a controlled environment, we would be better human beings to begin with. But one thing that I will still do is DMT, and I think it can teach you a lot. Done DMT before?
I have not done DMT. No, I've done. Back when I was younger, quite a bit of LSD. That'll do it. Yeah. In my teens and 20s mostly, and then not so much after that.
I thought with LSD, I mean, it can be so profound, but it can also be, because what LSD does for everyone who's tried it will 100% agree with what I'm about to say, but everyone who hasn't might be a bit like, what the fuck is he talking about?
Sure.
But if you've had acid, what it does is that it goes in your system. I mean, I don't think it should be classed as a drug, to be honest with you. It's a drug of some sorts. Of course, it's mind-altering substance, but it shouldn't be lumped in with the same as to the other shit that's out there. But it's almost like you got these boxes of information in your head, and then what LSD or mushrooms or DMT can do is they start opening all those boxes like that. You have all this information that it feels like it was already there, stored in the DNA, but it just didn't get unlocked, so it just goes and opens all this stuff up that can be quite overwhelming. And I don't think that it's necessary to reach those conclusions through a substance.
No.
I think that through perhaps meditation, through breath work, through certain experiences, you've got monks who live up in the Himalayas, and they spend 30 years just practicing breathing.
Sure.
And they can certainly reach those psychedelic states without any substance, and I think there's a lot to that we can go to, but the reason why I asked you the question, have you tried ayahuasca, is because there are a lot of people who suffer from bad sleep, and there are things that, you carry it in your body, like emotions, if you've got like a constant feeling of dread, or constant feeling of sorrow, constant feeling of solitude, or like tiredness, these emotions, they weigh on our body, and you have to be able to release it. And what these psychedelics, ayahuasca in particular, are great at doing, from what I understand, is the process of purging that they create, so you get to get rid of that and then almost rebuild.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, and then beyond that, mushrooms, and which I'm a fan of the use of mushrooms. Yeah. But again, it's not something I do all the time. And to your point, exactly, like I don't think it should become a crutch. It's not a substitute for any kind of esoteric discipline. You should absolutely try and blaze a certain path without the use of any of these things. But to do it, it's almost experiential. Just for the experience of it, and then you're widening the lens at that point. And so I think that's interesting. But no, it will never be a substitute for any kind of legit esoteric practice. And so I think people need to understand that.
Yeah, because even then, it's all about your control as well, whether it's a state of lucid dreaming or, astral projection, if you want to really go down that route. These are things that just because it happens doesn't mean that you've reached enlightenment.
No, certainly not. And if anything, you're entering into a different state, a more subtle state. But you're also not entering it triumphantly. You're entering it as, if anything, like your hands tied behind your back, perhaps, or at best case, as just an observer.
Yeah, like basically like playing football with flip-flops on.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Just to bring this back a little bit as well, you know, you were talking about the music and then sort of exploring that feeling of dread.
Yeah.
What is it that you would hope people would take away from the Akhlys live experience?
Oh, man. Well, you know, I like to, it feels to me when we really nail it that there's this level of mania to it, you know, and I think, you know, of course this is just the, you know, the brother of fucking dread right there. And, you know, I like that maniacal state to see that reflected back in the audience's eyes, you know, and make them, you know, if they weren't familiar with us already, you know, maybe want to go explore it a bit more. If they are familiar, to be, you know, inspired by it further, I suppose.
For sure. Well, almost like a trance-like kind of a state. Yeah. That's cool. I think that's what this genre is good for, actually.
Yeah, it can be very Bacchic, you know. Yeah, and different bands do it different ways, you know, and this is kind of our way, you know.
Absolutely, man. Well, Kyle, thank you so much for coming back.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, man.
It's my
absolute pleasure.
Really looking forward to seeing you guys on stage in couple of hours
Couple hours.
You can see the sun's coming down for it just in time.
Just a little bit, it'll dip down here, but yeah.
Amazing, man. Yeah. Well, this was a pleasure. And to everyone else listening, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. See you later.